This meeting is being recorded.
So remember, anything you say is going to appear on Facebook later. But so as I said, feel free to just interject, leave your sound on, and act like we're in a room together. So of all the people that I've met through this sometimes dubious, oh, wait a second, Julio, did you put it on take it off gallery for the reading, for the recording? Oh, I see, but I'm, okay, all right, I got it. So of all the people that I've met through this sometimes dubious miracle of the internet, Annie is perhaps the one I wish most I could sit down with in the flesh. In fact, I sometimes find it hard to believe that such a meeting hasn't happened already. For the rapport I find between us seems like it must be based on a living encounter. Is it possible for me to summon a dry objectivity in discussing her work? Well, frankly, no. Oh, I'm as capable as any vicious stranger, tossing out negative quips here and there about poems or poets I do not like at any given moment. Yet if I am going to spend any real precious time thinking and speaking about a poem or a poet, then it must be one that I personally am fond of. Encomium, then, rather than critique, is my preferred genre. That said, there are always hurdles that stand between one and one's subject, prejudices that must be overcome, gaps that must be imaginatively bridged. Anyone familiar with my often too querulous rantings on Erratosphere, that notorious online poetry workshop, must know in advance that I have no particular fondness for so-called light verse. Whereas Annie, it seems clear to me, loves light verse. She loves the lexical exercise of its various prescribed formulae. She loves to play with words. The tip of her tongue is a true shapeshifter. She loves to smile and to laugh. And I must confess that in her hands, what's light does not seem at all weightless to me. And what smiles does so just wryly enough for my tastes. I have long held, whoa, what was that? I have long held that one of the pitfalls of light verse has to do with the unavoidable vagaries of a sense of humor. So much of what I read in the light veins simply does not amuse me. And yet there is not a single chuckle that escapes from the pen of Drysdale that does not fill me with a parallel delight. I love that phrase, parallel delight, for it preserves both the shared joy and the reliable distance. And so by way of reassessment, who's hooting?
Sorry.
No, somebody's getting like some kind of interference, I think. And so by way of reassessment, de-dogmatizing my opinions, I will admit that there is, in the lightness of the best of light verse, a striking humility, as if one did not have to bear the tonal weight of ponderous subject matter in order to say something of heft. One can skip rope in the diarist of landscapes. And one can, and this is most germane to Annie's work, one can stay local rather than go vast. This local, this locale, this close to homeness is nowhere more in evidence than in her latest book, Feeling Unusual, many of whose fruits I assume to have ripened during the pandemic lockdown that has only recently released us all from our own local terrains. The narrow street outside is a towpath, and all the passers-by a scant 6 feet from where I watch them through my grubby portholes, are either good folk out for exercise or rough mechanicals about their business. And while aboard, I shall remain in safety until they and the pestilence have passed. What a lovely and light-tempoed plague song has escaped through the portholes of that conjured boat we all end up afloat on at one time or another. It's a pleasure to have such a little chat with one's own solitude, but it takes a great deal of honest craft to share that private chat effectively with the world. Now, the concept of a private world is always a palpable one for a poet, and our pandemic has only proven the viability of that inner sanctuary. Without it, many of us would have gone insane. Some have resisted and have fled solitude at the first available alternative, but others have lingered long enough to recognize a truth which the poet has known all along, that the local, carried to its inner end, to the limits of one's inner world, ends up in almost the same place as the vast, albeit with a bit more warmth. There really is no unit of measurement adequate to either outer or inner space. And I guess increasing age has something to do with both subject and tone here. For the older one gets, the more one is able to harness one's past to find contentment in one's present. And that echo-filled present is often manifest in what is simply before one and around one, even in one's most sedentary moments. For some, age brings rage, a touch of which may be salutary for the circulation. For others, it brings a curious kind of calm, with passionate nostalgia on one end of the seesaw and bemused renunciation on the other. The fulcrum remains a mystery, as always. Sphinx riddled, I continue my own journey down old paths round the too familiar, along with my lost dog and my last lover, making their being dead and out of danger into a curious kind of consolation. There are poems in this collection addressed to a toad, a snail, to nettles, to a walking stick, to bird bones, to stones, to a cat, to the ghost of a dog, to the changing seasons, to a can of Spam, to a wedge of halva, and to bed, to its old memory foam that can't forget. Annie, you have painted your little high terrace in Wales in such faithful detail that I feel as if I too know the place. As an inveterate traveler, only recently harbored, I immediately recognize the traveler's eye as applied to home ground. Until recently, I had despaired of ever being able to look at a familiar landscape with the same attentiveness I felt came naturally to an exotic one. But here I see it is possible to travel at home, through home, to remain alert to the unusual elements of the entirely familiar. I have previously always exhorted the traveler and everyone, always playing the role of uprooter, but my feet have grown tired. And now there is this slim volume which has convinced me that fascination is not always anchored in the object observed, but rather more often in the eye of the observer. Blue. It began with an interdental brush at the foot of the stone steps to the terrace, a tiny rectangle of brilliant blue. Once spotted, I began to look for it as I approached the corner where it was. I felt the better for its being there and glad to have it decorate my day. And then it went. I searched it once in the accumulated gubbins of the gutter, fished with a stick under a few parked cars, peered hopefully into the nearest drain. I was surprised at how bereft I felt when I was forced to face up to the fact that it had gone, undoubtedly forever. Later, as though by way of consolation, other examples would appear at random, dressed to impress in that peculiar blue, a ball, a burst balloon, a bottle cap crushed by a wheel into a crooked star. These things are the highlights in my book of hours, piercing the tired asphalt of the street like precious touches of ultramarine in medieval iconography. All that said, there is still a stranger who keeps knocking at home's door at regular intervals throughout this book. And though it is a familiar stranger, familiar from folklore, familiar from childhood, it still retains a quality that is never entirely assimilable. The sackcloth draped stick topped with a horse's skull, the Marie Lloyd, is the book's Rorschach blot, a mythic skeleton which experience may cloak as it may, with memory, with comedy, with poetic fancy, yet no matter how quaint or familiar the costume, no matter how comical, that knocking skull always opens up one little chink for dread, a dread which seeps under the doorsill into one's cozy home, intimation of the unknown settling down before the hearth. Further evidence that the vast is no enemy of the local, but its darker twin. One almost loses track of the boundaries of this mythic creature as it appears and disappears throughout the course of the book. Initially, it is the familiar figure from folklore, as it sings for entry and then sings beseeching exit, for it cannot stay. Soon enough, it resurfaces as a child possessed by a little gray pony, whispering stories of her own adventures into the busy silence of her head. Then in a herd of all but forgotten horses. They were doors extraordinary by way of books and toys and television, saddled with need and bridled with anxiety. They carried nervous passengers through puberty. And subsequently diving into the mythic violence of Welsh history, passing through paper mache and the current postal system, or flirting with cultural appropriation on the Wye Bridge, Chepstow, January 2019. Once a found, why I got an echo here. Is everybody hearing that?
Yeah.
Once a found skull mounted on a broomstick, bobbing above a man clad in a sack, going from door to door, a merry beggar. Now a bedecked, jeweled artifact, lit from within, giggling with bells, pimped like a virgin at a hand fasting. And yes, I did look up the word hand fasting, Annie, to see what it meant. I loved it before I looked up what it meant, and then I loved it even more. Penultimately, in what? Penultimately, in what might well have been its final materialization, were Annie not such a skillful adept in the light touch so often necessary to sustain us, the dread takes its full form, moving stealthily from the corner of the eye to the center of the gaze. Marie Lloyd will be coming soon. She is expecting guests. The fine bone china that belonged to her grandmother graces the perfect surface of the immaculate cloth. All of it out, even the unnecessary, the extra cruet and the great tureen. Only a single piece is not in place. The cup she holds that lets arthritic fingers cast youthful shadows through the skin of it, but the amber of the final drop of stupidly expensive oolong tea. She hears them at the door, the tipsy laughter, clatter of ill-matched lids and dented saucepans. She puts the cup unwashed onto the saucer, then takes one backward step, and with both hands, she heaves the cloth from underneath the china. Not a magician's flick. The artless tug of a first-time destroyer, merely keen to find out what will happen. All her skills have hitherto been honed for acquisition, followed by years of care and conservation. It is, as she envisaged, one great fall of pride and the long crash of desolation. Outside, there is a new silence. Inside, there is a crunch of eggshells underfoot as she opens the door to the pale hopes. As a poet who is perhaps over-enamored of the vast, this is undoubtedly the moment when I, were this my volume, might have laid down my pen face to face with the pale horse. But Annie, bless her and her many horses, has one final materialization up her sleeve. And thus her book ends, fittingly enough, in a theater, a makeshift English music hall, where we witness a slapstick duet between Marie Lloyd, the equine visitor, and the actress Marie Lloyd, the woman at home on the stage, as it were. There is an audience enthusiastically applauding the act, and in my mind, the entire book. After curtain call, we meet the two characters briefly outside the theater, exchanging outfits, confusing identity, shifting shapes. As this remarkable book, which might have ended with death, ends instead with a quiet transformation. Marie is bareheaded, gray-haired, and walking with a stick. Marie is now wearing Marie's hat. They are both transformed. Well done, Annie, and thanks. So,
Oh, thanks, Nemo.
so is it Matt now, or is it you?
Well, I'll read you first a poem that you didn't refer to, but some of the Brits might recognise an echo in it of a comedy situation. Very early on in the just making sure you can hear me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we can hear you.
Yeah.
Oh, that's okay. It was written very early on in the in the pandemic, when we were all closed down. In fact, almost in the first few days. This is called Soup. Woman gesticulating at the window. Soup? You want soup? She mimes a lifted elbow. I must have looked aghast. Soup, she repeats. We have soup in the car. Do you want some? I find a smile, hurriedly thrust it on, and send my answer through it. No, thank you. 3 days into the lockdown, here they are, exhorted by the local media to take good care of those who seem at risk. Kind folk, intent on doing simple good. But I am left appalled to understand I'm on their list of neighbours in decline. Of course it's true. I'm an old woman. 70 is the allotted span, and I'm already into extra time. I'm looking back, but for the life of me, I can't determine at what point in it I turned around and set a course for home. Intimations of mortality, you see, come even in bowls of soup. Perhaps it's time for Matt now.
Okay. Thank you very much, Annie. Thanks for asking me to read. I'm reading Bed, which is on page 13 if you want to follow along. Bed. This is my roost, my place of same again. Just as sparrows plug themselves one by one into the ivy on the outer wall, I part accumulated layers of nocturnal comfort, sliding my worn self into the waiting slot carved by long use in old memory foam that can't forget the one who comes like a devoted lover, night after night, into its bailiwick. This is the place that waits for me all day. I'm an old knife, carefully restored to my allotted place in the canteen, and I will lie where I'm supposed to go, so that I know where I am to be found next time I need to use myself again.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, it's great to have a poem read by somebody who obviously understands what it feels like to slip into that space. Days are inclined to end in bed, but that's also where they start. And this poem is a little UK ritual that precedes even the first cup of tea in my day. Every morning on FM, as the world service gives way to our national radio, 5:20 GMT every day without fail, and there finds me drawing the waters. Alan Kasuja, Nkem Ifechika, wireless custodians of the hours of night, news of the world, voices of Africa. Now, British diction interrupts the flow. 5:20, a greeting, a goodbye. BBC Radio 4 is good to go. News of sea areas, coastal stations, then the iteration of the inshore waters. My finger itches to explore again, and on the wrinkled counterpane, I trace the promontories of the land I love. Whisper anticipation of each place. Cape Wrath to Rattray Head, familiar thrill. Berwick to Whitby, following the coast. Gibraltar Point, North Foreland, Chelsea Bill. Down and along. Lyme Regis to Land's End. And then 2 heads, St. David's and Great Orme, each one announced like an expected friend. Over to Ulster from the Isle of Man, wave to the west from Ardnamurchan Point, and then I come to rest where I began. When every lovely name has been gone, my tracing finger rests. All shall be well. My home is whole. The day can carry on. The use, you see, for a specific compulsive disorder. It begins my day beautifully.
Mark, I think, next.
Yes, Mark next, yes.
Okay.
Hi, Mark.
Hi, Annie. Right. Nemo was talking about feeling like he knows Annie, just personally, despite having never met her in the flesh. Annie's the only poet that I've ever met in flesh. And she was good enough to grace my abode. Was it about 3 years ago, Annie?
Yeah, if not more. Yeah.
Yeah. In the summer, I had the house to myself for a week. My family had abandoned me to go on a holiday. I was cat sitting, and Annie came up to visit, and it was absolutely wonderful. I made a veggie chili, took her to the local pubs. It was an absolutely delightful weekend that will live in my memory. The poem that I'm going to read, I absolutely love this one. There were so many that I wanted to read, but I'm glad that I ended up with this one. It's what's the word? It's an ekphrastic. Is that a word? I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. It's an ekphrastic of sorts. It's my kind of ekphrastic, and you should probably see. So it's based on. I don't know how well this is going to show up, but I think you need to see the image. So this medieval painting, and specifically, we need to zoom in to the Holy Spirit up at the top. And I think you need this image in mind as we read the poem. There's the third part of the trilogy, Descending to Earth. Okay, so here we go. Oh, I just echoed. I'm thinking whenever there's any mysterious noises, it's the Mary Lloyd knocking.
Actually, I think it's mostly John Marcus.
Okay, either that or
Because the squares light up when there's a sound. So
right. Okay. How beautiful are the feet? A meditation on the baptism altarpiece of Niccolo di Pietro Guerini in the National Gallery. Jesus is tall. John has to really stretch so as to tip his terracotta pot over the high head of the Son of Man. God's chuffed. He's just let go the Holy Spirit to send it plummeting headfirst from heaven. The kamikaze nosedive showcases its silly feet, two brown banana skins that stick out sideways from the fuselage, making me laugh out loud. Oh, Nicola, what a fine thing to offer the Lord. God's good at feet, a whiz at finishing the legs of birds. I've always loved the gnarly grabs of irritated chickens, the whisker digits of the wren, the soft, undeveloped token feet of swifts. I grinned a bit at the lobed toes of coots until I watched one running on soft mud with her umbrellas spreading underfoot to take her safe across the top of it, turning to oars as she launched on the water. On the beaches of the Galapagos, the booby shuffles in his blue suede shoes as though nobody but his love is watching. Despite the shadows of the looming cruisers and the susurrus of the clicking twitchers. To each, God gave according to his need, regardless of the flocks of jeering hooters. Lord, may the 6 feet that I end beneath lie light as those that have amused me most, the coot, the booby, and the Holy Ghost. Amazing.
close.
It's one of my favourites too.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
And how
I anticipate
wonderful
the
of
end
you.
coming. It's such a
How
pleasure.
wonderful of you to show them.
Sorry?
I said, how wonderful of you to find the
Well,
feet
I felt
and show
it occurred to me about half an hour before I logged on. I thought we need to see those feet. And every time I read that poem, just when I'm reading it to myself, the pleasure in anticipation of that final couplet is just, it's palpable. I love reaching the end of it.
Yeah. Is Julie Steiner with us?
Oh, she signed up earlier, but I don't think she came.
Because that's who I was with in the National Gallery. She
Oh,
and her
really?
daughter.
Oh, really?
When we saw,
Wow.
when we saw the
Oh, you've met her.
Holy Ghost. I was fascinated by it.
Oh.
But it's
And
really
I was going to show a picture of boobies really do have blue feet, don't they? But
They do.
That'd be overkill. I'd be just messing with my phone. But yeah, check out a booby's feet.
So feet. Can I stay with feet? Because over these last few years, haven't been getting about a lot apart from on feet. In my last book, I wrote a poem called Winterreise about a walk in the cold weather with my dear old dog. And recently, I've done the walk again, dogless, and in summer, in better weather. So this poem is called Sommerreise. Riffing on an old poem, I repeat a walk I used to do in better days. The lower slopes of Bliner's spinal ridge. Blundering down the ever-shifting scree, I chunter cheerfully to a dead dog in my hen-fisted Hendecasyllax. One small dog with a definite advantage, 4 legs good and 2 manifestly less so. Miss him. Now I go alone on 3. Sphinx riddled, I continue my own journey. Down old paths around the too familiar, along with my lost dog and my last lover, making their being dead and out of danger into a funny kind of consolation. Who's next, Nima?
Mary.
Mary.
Oh, hi. Okay. Just let me get out my notes here. It is a truth universal. Blah, 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 blah. It is a truth universally acknowledged that women of a certain age lose estrogen and gain testosterone. I chose this poem partly for its wonderful trans expression of testosterone, in which a woman poet pictures herself as a, quote, stout fellow. The poem is called Quarterstaff. The dictionary labels quarterstaff as a historical word and defines it as, quote, a stout pole 6 to 8 feet long, tipped with iron, formerly used as a weapon. Quarterstaff. High summer. Striding out just before dawn along the lowest Dram road on the mountain. Across the valley, all the houses lie like scattered boxes at a birthday party. If somebody is there behind a bush or peeping through a window, what's to see? Only a stout fellow in a red jerkin, taking a stance, raising a hefty stick with stretched arms, holding it above his head, hands clasped equidistant from either end. Holding the pose a while, lowering slowly to pause again, drawing it straight and tight under his belly for a count of 3. Will Scarlett practicing in Sherwood Forest for his next tussle with the sheriff's men? No, me, practicing breathing up and in and down and out. A daily ritual against the day it may be called upon to help me hold my ground against a foe. I think that the last sentence here is just a knockout. A daily ritual against the day it may be called upon to help me hold my ground against a foe. It gets the whole thing with breathing and life and facing death and aging all in one. It makes me cry every time I read it because it's just so poignant and so concise. It's just beautiful, Annie, beautiful.
Oh, thank you, Mary. Yeah, I'm glad you picked up on the fact of the quarterstaff being a weapon. I just lately, as I say, my Sphinx riddle, yes, my third leg, my walking stick goes with me everywhere now when I'm outdoors. Really,
Really?
I have a great collection of them. It's also, I found it's a good measure of social distancing, you know, when we were supposed to keep a certain rate apart from one another. But one walking stick, one extended arm is just about right. And it does take on a weapon in another context. This poem is me crossing swords with an adversary. It's called Fencing. You call me across the street, challenging me. Oh, there you are. I want to talk to you. I'm horrified. I know your way of talking, the edging nearer for the shoulder touch, the leaning in, conspiratorial, the sudden finger poke for emphasis. These cannot be achieved at a safe distance. I hide my fear behind a smile. Allez! We stand on an unmarked 2-meter piste, prepared to carry out our conversation. You raise your saber, open the assault. I parry, come straight back with a riposte. You move towards me for a call, earning another piece. Step back, please. I effortlessly parry every lunge till I can call a halt and disengage, citing the age-old rule of prior engagement, because I do not choose to be touché. That's it.
Sarah Jane. Your sound is off.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm reading Stones with Sad Faces, and I love this. I love this because it's about things and they transform. I love it because when I read it, I can feel the stones in my hand. I love it because I've always collected stones, so it chimes, but I haven't as well. And I love it because it moves from that small thing to the huge vastness that Nemo was talking about earlier. It encapsulates that, but in a very light way, and it questions. So I did not plunder indiscriminately. It's simply my habit to look down. I took only those that asked to be taken. Those with appealing eyes that caught my own. Some had mouths too, and those were a bonus, a faint approximation of a smile, a sullen underscore, an aghast O. Anything that suggested a stone face booked them a homeward passage in my pocket. Gifts from the places where I first observed them, mementos that would be forever loved. I still recall the why of all of them, but most of their wherefroms are petrified into their now, sideboard and windowsill, dried out and dull, accumulating dust. Muddled and shuffled, out of their origins they call to me, confused from bowl and basket, till slowly I have come to understand it would have served them better had I left them to anonymity amongst their brethren. The slow erosion of the elements, the innocent carelessness of the sea.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm just so glad there's another thing gatherer. I am so, yeah. My laptop is very carefully placed so you can see the books, but not all the things. They are my secret. I'm just a little bit ashamed of them, some of them. But finding things is part of my life. Again, a walking stick features in this poem because I poke it into the undergrowth. Everybody who's been on a walk with me and my walking stick will know that I keep prodding at things. It's part of my way of progression. I poke it into the undergrowth as I go about this, and it's amazing what its little rubber ferrule is ferreted out. These are some bones. Flicking leaf litter with the rubber tip of an ordinary walking stick often reveals the skeletal remains of some small creature that has reached the end of its allotted span. Here lies a lark, all split and swindled out of its music, leaving behind a pile of instruments with which to call it back. Balanced on beads, a single white maraca sits in silence. A rib marimba, underpinned by sinews, lies alongside a scattering of hammers, long flutes of legs, a keel tambourine to back a gaping beak's absence of singing, in a lament, to lay a bird to rest. I think it's Alison now.
Yes, Alison did the cover of the book, right?
That's it.
She's the painter of the image on the cover of the book. Hi, Alison.
Hello. I'm reading the first one, the Mary Lloyd dances. I'd originally wanted to read the one where all the china is smashed on the table, but it was already taken. And in fact, I've been doing quite a lot of drawings with the Mary Lloyd smashing china. And actually, I've done nothing over the last, I think it's 2 years, but drawings and paintings to do with Mary Lloyd. And this first one, Mary Lloyd dances, seems to be closest to what I'm drawing, this sort of cheerful, friendly horse's skull that cheerfully destroys all our hopes and dreams and carries us away in her gunny sack in the end when we die, but always cheerfully, friendlily somehow. So that's why I'm reading this one. It's Mary Lloyd dances. Bone white, star bright, I have come to you tonight. I bear no malice, bring no sin. Open the door and let me in. I am the horse that used to be the pitman's drudge or the punter's chance, but benevolent death has set me free, and off I go on my crazy dance. I shall dance that dance from dusk till dawn with the moon above and the road beneath. Having no hooves to drum my tune, I'll dance to the clatter of my teeth. My worldly goods are few indeed, 2 worn-out boots and a gunny sack, though these are the only things I need to dance to the edge of the world and back. But the dance is fast and the road is long, and sometimes I need to catch my breath, so I stop at your door and I sing my song of the old illusions of life and death. I'll sing for you and then I'll knock. Here I am, oh my next of kin, and you will turn the key in the lock to keep me out or bring me in. What you'll give, I'll always take. Drink your beer and eat your cake. Where I am bound, I do not know. Open the door and let me go.
Oh, thank you, Ali. Yeah, Mary Lloyd has brought us together and together with a lot of other people. And I decided I'll read now, although Nemo mentioned it in his wonderful assessment at the beginning. It's not just me who's fascinated by Mary. You know, we have friends, do we not, Ali? Equally obsessed. She's become a bit of a cult figure and far beyond Wales. She's celebrated by people who are drawn to the spiritual and the strange. She's been adopted by the hippie subculture. There are meetings and celebrations, and unconventional conventions, and in unexpected places. And this poem grew out of a particularly spectacular gathering of Marys that took place on the Wye Bridge in Chepstow, where English Marys and Welsh Marys met. And there was a huge number of them. There's a video of them all, and it's extraordinary. This is the Mary Lloyd with bells and whistles. See the army on the bridge, met for battle. Ramshackle gathering of ghostly horses. One-off interpretations of a whim. Once a found skull mounted on a broomstick, bobbing above a man clad in a sack, going from door to door, a merry beggar. How a bedecked, bejewelled artifact, lit from within, giggling with little bells, pimped like a virgin to hand fasting. 30 are gathered with their entourages, whose sacks are velvet cloaks. They gloom and glint as the torches sway in the slow progress. Not so much cultural appropriation as new age sprouting on a found tradition. Mistletoe berries on an ancient tree. Enthusiasm justifies the theft. And it's the reason why the skulls of horses command high prices on the internet. have a few. And we'll stay with Murray because I think Frank's going to. Yeah.
Hi. Yes. Thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. You all know by now, certainly, that we have two cultures, two literatures, and two languages circling and eddying in Wales. And the poems that I'm going to read are Annie's responses to ancient Welsh tales in Welsh and in translation. And then she asked me to translate her poem from English into Welsh. And so we have a kind of cycle of influences and languages. And it's interesting. I work part as a translator, but I'm also a poet. And it's interesting always to have that kind of relationship, that cross-pollination between the two languages within the walls of a poem. So these are the horses of Matholwch, the Irish king in the second branch of the Mabinogi. Efnisien took me and broke me, not by long reining, training to bit and saddle, but blade hacking me into something less than horse. My eyes and ears taken, my lips cropped to wet rags bleeding over my teeth, so that I could not graze for the pain. I am knocking, knocking. Let me pass through the door. Somewhere in a corner of a field, soft with clover, smelling of other than blood, Nishen waits, shaking a bucket. I can see him clearly, hear the feed whispering. I will use my new lips to kiss chaff from his flat palm and rest my mended head on his honest shoulder. Fe gydiodd Efnisien ynodd am torri. Nid ag awen hir na ffrwyn na chyfrwy, ond ei lafnwaith erchyll, im difwyno'n rhywbeth llai na march. Fy llygaid, fy nghlustiau wedi dwyn, fy ngweflau crop yn garpiau gwlyb yn gwaedu dros fy nanedd, fel na chawn bori rhag y boen. Rwy'n curo, curo. Gad i mi ddod trwy'r drws. Rhywle yng nghornel cai, yn feddal gan feillion, ac am genach sawr mewn gwaed. Fe erys Nisien, yn ysgwyd bwced. Fe gwelaf yn glir, clywaf, sisial o gogor. Defnyddiaf fy ngweflau newydd i gysanu'r eisyn o gledr wastad ei law. A phwysof ym mhen trwsiedig ar ei ysgwydd glen.
That was great.
Diolch.
Diolch yn fawr.
Croeso.
No, it was a very, very frightening thing to take something as important as the Mabinogion and take something from it, feeling that perhaps I didn't have a right to do it. And the fact that you, Frank, agreed to translate it into Welsh for me, made it matter to me so much that it sort of stopped the little place where I felt it might be leaking or bleeding, because I pulled something out and you mended it and put it back. Thank you very, very much.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Yeah, one of the other things that I've been doing over this last strange time is restoring an abandoned garden. When my husband died, it was his one and only asset, really, and my right to inherit it was in question for several years. But finally, I've taken command of it, so to speak. And in that garden, there is a pond. And in that pond, there is a fish. Possibly. This is Tench. Pale lips, Ophelia's, kissing the cool surface before the grey-green turn. The disappearance, a swift glimpse of an unsuspected Tench, left in the depths of the abandoned pond, the day I shut the gate and let it be. Now, decades later, I've reclaimed the land, stepping back into the old shared vision, renewing my acquaintance with the trees, keeping our promise to the unseen creatures that have made homes among the dereliction. I am restoring our abandoned pond, wondering if I'll see those waxy lips, wishing I might, hoping I don't, believing that for as long as I remain unsure, the old Tench will be safe among the lilies. Taken for granted, hypothetical. My faith will save it, like applause for fairies, like the imagined cat of every colour, preserved forever in a lidless box, as a beloved possibility. Someone who knows all about the Tench and actually provided the lilies is my good friend Angela France, who I think is going to read next for us.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Anne. I do want to say before I read how much, Alison, I love this cover. And
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you.
it holds that cheerfulness that you mentioned. I mean, she just looks cheerful. I just love it. Loved it from the first moment Annie showed it to me.
Well, thank you very much.
This one, like Mark, I was very torn as to what to read because there are so many wonderful poems here. This one does particularly speak to me. Marie Lloyd finds the forgotten horses because I was one of those girls with a horse that became forgotten, or maybe not quite forgotten as you grow up. So Marie Lloyd finds the forgotten horses. Her boots assume the consistency of bread, with hobnails softened into silent wine gums. Her mouth ajar, so her teeth will not chatter. She takes a breath and tiptoes into limbo. Here they spin, weightless, the aborted horses in their various stages of completion, each one imagined by an urban girl and knitted bit by bit into existence. They were the doors out of the ordinary, by way of books and toys and television. Saddled with need and bridled with anxiety, they carried nervous passengers through puberty. Some rode alone, others in 5s and 7s, all but a few dismounted when they felt safe to proceed on foot, leaving their steeds to fade into the shadows of new trees. Here they remain, dreamed up and discarded, some still unfinished, some beyond repair, none of them any use to other riders. Only the Marie Lloyd knows they're there.
Yes. Oh, thanks, Angela.
Mine was a Palomino. What was yours?
Oh, it was he was a chestnut stallion, of course, and only I could ride him.
Yes.
It's there are many things that get lost and forgotten as we grow away from them. But when you get to the later stages of life, it begins to get a bit frightening when things disappear. I lost a saint. I was eventually helped to find him by the intervention of a mouse. It was a similarly named cartoon mouse, the one that used to throw bricks at Crazy Cat. This is the battle between the Jesuits and the Franciscans. Bleary and one-eared in the early morning, I caught a name dropped from the purring radio and held it for a moment in my head. Ignatius of Loyola, an old friend, whose prayer I used to rattle off by heart. How did it go again? I knew. and called it with a languid finger snap. A quiet voice spake unto me at once. Make me, it said, an instrument of thy peace. Where there is discord, I replied, and stop. This was the wrong voice and the wrong prayer, parked like a cattle truck across the road that led to the Society of Jesus. Oh, Francis of Assisi, go away and take your prayer with you. I need to find the one that I've mislaid. St. Anthony, give me a clue. It's dark and I'm afraid. But Francis stood his ground. Where there is error, I tried to hold my nerve, telling myself this was a new cross I must learn to bear, but that if I had faith, my memory would pull the lost words like a string of flags out of a prestidigitator's hat. And as I breakfasted, Francis went out to feed the birds with the last crumbs of toast. Ignatius became Ignaz, chucked a brick that made my head ring like a rattle bucket, cried, "That'll teach you." And it did indeed. It served me right. It was what I deserved. Yes, those who are religious among us will know that the prayer of St. Ignatius Loyola does begin. Teach us, good Lord, to serve thee as thou servest. Good old Ignaz. Little angel.
So it's Walter's turn, right?
Walter, yeah, Walter, save me, save me.
Upon a snail, which I realized I kind of look like a snail. I feel like that. After Bunyan, who I assume is John Bunyan, who wrote Progress. He goes but slowly, but he goeth sure. His Shelley hat nobody doth, he doth too. He leaveth sticky tinsel on the floor, so we can see where he hath slithered off to. He keeps his innards in a trinket box, as fine as any on a dressing table. He rolls his eyes up like a pair of socks, and squirts them out again when he is able to do so, without being put upon by interfering interested parties. He lives in fear of being trodden on or written on by snooty parties. He eats the food that nature put for him. He walks upon his stomach, which is odd, but nature made it like a foot for him, and that is why he's called a gastropod.
Oh, thank you, Walter.
Of course.
Yes, you do look a bit snaily, but it is lovely to see you, and thank you so much for coming. Bunyan there, yes, you're right. John Bunyan it was who wrote the original snail poem, but no book of mine would be complete without a nod to Keats. Never without one. And here we have a poem about my beloved cat and the companionship we shared during lockdown. It's called Synchronicity. The house honks, and a fusty hum appalls my nostrils. While I laboured in the loo, Cat in her litter did the ritual waltz, then squatted down and defecated too. Our mutual relief is evident, and nothing I can do will stop it stinking. Cat nonchalantly cleans her fundament. I sip a cup of tea, sniffing and thinking. Like typists in a pool, whose monthly flows will shift until they menstruate together. We too have shat in unison, which shows how close we have become to one another. And though the smell is bad, the thought is good, a token of a sort of sisterhood.
John Marcus Powell.
Thank you, Annie, for writing this book. And thank you for this poem. This poem seems to me to be a little like the Reverend Eli Jenkins from Under Milk Wood. same type of comedy, which is very serious, really, has a lot to say. It's called Spam. Beautiful spam, so nearly meat. You came about as a wartime treat, with a pinch of pork and a hint of ham and a whiff of austerity. Beautiful spam. Beautiful spam, who then would wish for snurk or any funny fish, of flesh of billy, bull or ram. Oh, meat of the multitude, beautiful spam. Beautiful spam, your pale pink prism, plonked on a plate with Platonism, stands for the grandeur of Uncle Sam, gift of America, beautiful spam. Beautiful spam, I thee exalt, sodium nitrite, fat and salt, the fair foundation of all I am. Feast of obesity, beautiful spam. Thank you. Sounded Welsh, right?
Yes, it did.
I love the Welsh poem, by the way. It so makes me feel so guilty being Welsh and not speaking a word of it. It was beautiful, the Welsh. I loved it. Thank you, Annie.
Thank you. Oh, John Marcus, I still remember that wonderful afternoon we spent in the vineyard in Abergavenny. You remember?
Absolutely. You see, I do know you. I know you in the flesh.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, I remember it was a very cold day, and the people in the cafe brought us blankets, and we sat there like.
Yes. Did we have wine? We didn't have wine. Did we have coffee?
We didn't. We had coffee, and they didn't have any mille-feuille. I was most upset.
Yes. Yes, I remember you saying my nephew was with us, right? And I said, he's nice, isn't he? You said, yes, everyone should have one.
Also, Annie, Julie is here. Speaking of people you've met, she came on later. Julie, hey. Her sound is off. Oh, hey, how are you? Your name came up before because Annie read the poem about the painting that you had seen with her in the National Gallery.
Yes.
Yeah, she was asking to see if you were here. I saw
Yes,
you
that was
sneak in later.
That was a lovely afternoon, and my daughter got to meet her too.
Oh, great, great. Are you going to do a finale now, Annie?
Yeah, I know what. We'll end up back in the garden. At the garden I told you about that I was reclaiming. And as Robert Frost said, you come too. It's called Survivors. Coming back to the garden, the dispute resolved, I found that it hadn't expired, but evolved. The original concept was more or less whole, but the birch, the bramble, had taken control. The flowers we planted may well still be there, but I can't at a glance say undoubtedly where. The shrubs and the bushes are strong and in leaf, but the birch and the bramble both beg a belief. The birch is a chancer that leaches thin ground. The bramble's a monster that reaches around and clings with its fingers to all vacant spaces, to throttle its rivals and thrive in their places. These are the trees of backcountry and heath, and the clever food giver that creeps underneath. These are the rough, undesirable plants that colonize habitats nobody wants. When folk have done thatching, the present is past, and time has decided what's destined to last. The strongest and fittest will stand up and shout. The birch, the bramble, will see us all out. A thought to leave with you.
Annie.
Yay.
Yay.
Hey.
Woo.
Woo-woo.
I assume everyone has the book, so I don't know whether we're gonna. I guess the only way to get it in the States is just to go on Amazon, right?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because from here, no matter where you get it from, there's
Huge.
shipping charges.
Yeah. So I
Oh,
checked it. What?
Yeah. One thing I was going to ask Mark while he's still here. I think remembering the time we spent at his house and the film we watched,
Yeah.
in a state of collapse on the couch. Yeah. Are you going to be the one that springs the truth of the title, where it came from?
Oh, yes. So, indeed. So, Feeling Unusual comes from it's a British film called Withnell and I, made in the late 80s, about two sort of dissolute, out of work actors. It's an astonishing film if you've never seen it. It's one of those movies that every line in the script is an absolute gem. And I don't think there's a line in the movie that isn't kind of quotable and memorable and wry or outrageous. It's just a perfect script. And so they've been inside sort of drinking and taking various chemicals and staying, you know, they haven't slept in sort of 72 hours. And the main character of Withnell says, I think we need to go outside. I'm feeling unusual. So that's where the line comes from. Or it's the other way around. I'm starting to feel unusual. I think we need to go outside. And there's a moment they do go outside. I have to give you one more quote. And they're sitting on a park bench in Regent's Park in the freezing sort of winter. It's set in 1969. And Withnell spits, he sort of hawks up something green and horrible from his throat and says, look at that. Aside from a raw potato, that's the only solid to have passed my lips in the last 5 days. So, yeah, that's where he comes from. Feeling unusual. And we watched it having consumed a few bottles of red wine, I think, hadn't we? And a few pints in the pub.
Yes.
I don't drink anymore.
I often wondered whether that was.
I'm not tracing. Maybe it traces back to that evening. I don't know.
I like how the